Hello, Empowered Warriors. Welcome to episode 18. So if you've been following me for a while, chances are at some level you really want to change your life. Am I right? If this is you and you're someone who also has a hard time speaking up for yourself, then this episode is really for you. This is for the people pleasers, the one who often hide out of fear of what others may think, out of fear of hurting someone else, or they hide out of fear of showing the world how amazing they truly are. So if you're curious to learn more, if you're curious how you can make an impact while having the life of your dreams, simply by learning how to use your voice and come from your higher power, then warriors, stay tuned. Welcome to the Empowered Warrior Podcast. My name is Angela Noel, and I am an intuitive coach, acupuncturist, and Chinese herbalist. This podcast is all about empowerment, meaning how you can maintain your personal power in order to have the best life beyond your imagination. An empowered warrior is someone who has the identity of a person who is healthy, radiant, and free from all suffering, and has the tools ready and available to move through life's obstacles with confidence, ease, and a sense of freedom. In this podcast, I bring over 16 years experience in Chinese medicine, countless years of self-development, and a passion for helping others find their personal power. I will be discussing just a few of my favorite topics regarding health from a Chinese medicine perspective, brain habits, and spirituality, so that you can quickly pave your pathway to freedom and be free from the chains that have kept you stuck. My intention with this podcast is to serve as a guide for warriors who want to form a healthy foundation of body, mind, and spirit, and sustain it by changing who they are being from the inside and having a stronger connection to their higher selves. My goal is to help students end the unnecessary suffering that they place on themselves by having poor health habits, negative thought loops, and a lack of self-worth. I am so happy that you're here. Hello, warriors. Welcome to episode 18. I am so happy that you've joined me for yet another episode, as we are already in the month of September 2020 at the time of this recording. So, one thing that has really been going through my mind lately that I felt that I needed to share is on the topic of using your voice, speaking up. You may or may not be somebody who identifies as a people pleaser, or somebody who just likes to be nice, or somebody that's simply afraid to say the thing that is needed to be said to the other person because you fear judgment or backlash, or it comes from this place of really being afraid of putting yourself out there. Am I right? I feel like this is a really common issue. I feel like with people in general, because of that whole need to be in a tribe, the feeling that you need to belong, to be accepted. And that's certainly understandable, am I right? Because we as human beings, animals, right? When you think about observing animals in the wild, they need to have their tribe, their group, their posse, because that is the only way that they're going to survive, right? If they get ousted from the group, ousted from the tribe, and they're out on their own in the wild, chances are they're going to die. And when it comes to primitive human beings, it isn't any different, because many people don't like to recognize this, but we are also animals. And there was a time where we were wild, and it was important for us to be part of a tribe, was it not? And you think about that one person who spoke out or went against the grain in the tribe or decided to rebel. And those people were often killed by their tribe, or they were left to die by themselves. So there's a sense of safety and survival that comes from being part of the tribe as far as belonging and having friendships and being in our groups where we feel accepted and loved. And it all comes down to a basic human need of feeling accepted and loved. And if you've been following me for a while, you probably already know that I am all about not just, in the earlier episodes, I used to talk about how I was a rebel, right? And how I used to just go against the grain. But the more I do this podcast and the more I study self-development and the more I serve other people and help them get out of their own stories, their old programming, their beliefs, and help them elevate their self-worth so that they can have the wealth, the business, the health, whatever it is that they're after. I tend to work with a lot of entrepreneurs. So I'm learning as a result of working with these folks that it's not necessarily a matter of being a rebel. It's more of a matter of stepping into your integrity and aligning with your higher self in order to, in this case for entrepreneurs, serve people in the highest way possible. Because in the end, if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or a heart-centered individual and you have this genuine desire to serve according to your highest good, chances are there are going to be times where you are going to be forced to speak your truth. And it doesn't come from a place of wanting to hurt somebody, as you probably already know, but it comes from a place of, hey, I'm going to speak my truth and be honest with you because in the end, this is for the highest good, not only for you, not only for me, but for all of humanity. And think about it, okay? I'm just going to paint a little scenario, and I'll speak a little bit of my story a little bit and my personal background. So I grew up, I have very, very wonderful parents. I grew up with really kind-hearted parents, and they're very well liked. They have a lot of friends. It always blows me away whenever I'm home visiting them and we go out to dinner, go out somewhere in public, and they're constantly running into people they know. I mean, a lot of people know my parents and they're very well loved. And I grew up in this family environment where I was just taught to be nice. And it's not, there's no, I want to make this perfectly clear. There's no bashing or blaming or pointing the finger. It's just it was my reality when I was growing up. I was raised to be a good girl, and I was raised to be considerate of other people and all those good things, that really good qualities to have. But what I was finding is that sometimes this good girl syndrome, it came at the expense of myself. So when it came down to, if I was given the opportunity to speak up, oftentimes I chose not to out of fear of backlash or of not being liked. And I was a really shy, quiet child. So the last thing I wanted was any more attention being brought upon me or to ever feel like people didn't like me. But what I learned, and this is something that's taken like all of my adult life to learn, is that when you are not honest with somebody, when you are not speaking your truth, first of all, you are taking away the opportunity of that other person to have the experience that they need to have in order to grow and evolve. So for example, if you're married or you're in a committed relationship and you may not be getting along, for example, and you constantly hide and run away from any opportunity to speak up and speak your truth. I happen to know that this is a big problem in a lot of relationships and in a lot of marriages. There are a lot of struggling marriages out there, and people just stop talking to each other, or perhaps they never properly learn to talk to each other as adults, because it's just not something that many of us were raised to learn doing, is to talk to each other as adults, to do the interpersonal work so that we are operating in the world as a person who is 38, 41, 53, 61 years old, and not operating from a place of, say, a 3-year-old, because that person never learned how to develop the skills of communicating openly. And that's a problem I see all the time. And if you are a listener, I'm guessing there is a statistic out there. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I would say out of my listeners, there's probably a 50 to, that's really low, 50 to 80% chance that you are in a relationship where you are just not happy. And most of the time, it comes down to poor communication, because we're not communicating with each other. Now, first of all, if you're somebody that is not speaking your truth in your relationship or in whatever situation, if it's your business partner or your life partner or your friends or people at work, you're doing them a disservice by not speaking your truth. Okay, you're doing a disservice to yourself because you're just burying all those emotions, all that hurt, that anger, that frustration is just being buried within you. And oftentimes that can, if you do that over time, I once heard that resentment is the most dangerous and deathly. I actually heard this at a seminar somewhere. It's one of the most deathly emotions to have, because resentment builds up over time and it causes stagnation of chi, right? If you think of the proper expression of emotions, if you think of things happening organically as they're supposed to happen, that is chi movement, that is flow, that is human beings being in a flow state, that is a human being honest and speaking her truth, and there is no holding back. Whereas a person who doesn't speak her truth builds resentment, and that can lead to stagnation of chi. And I'm not going to go into the Western medical aspects because that's not my area of specialty, but chances are, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say that unexpressed emotions, I have somebody that I know in one of the groups that I'm in, he teaches New German medicine, and I don't proclaim to be an expert in this at all, but he's really big on this, that unexpressed emotions cause disease. And if you start asking people who have chronic illness if they have resentment or anger or hurt, or if they were never somebody to speak up, and they have some kind of disease of stagnation, right? Of hardening in Chinese medicine, we look at hardening of the arteries and tumors and cysts and menstrual blood that is really clotted and body pain, aches in the muscles. That is all a sign of qi and blood stagnation. That is the inability of qi to move through the body as it's supposed to because of trauma, because of stuck emotions. And in Chinese medicine, we look at lots of reasons behind these kinds of pathologies. So that's one way. That's one reason why it's really important to speak your truth and speak out and speak your word. Another reason is, like I mentioned earlier, you're robbing that other person that needs to hear your truth of their own individual experience. So, for example, if you are holding back saying something, and let me be clear, if you are in an abusive relation or an abusive situation, I really urge you to get the help that you need and make sure that you are safe before you follow any advice that I'm giving on this podcast. But if you go to that person and assuming everything is safe, you go to this person and you speak your truth, even though this person is not going to like hearing what needs to be said to this person, he or she, whoever we're talking about. It is not your responsibility for the way that that person responds. It is not your responsibility if that person, and this is assuming that you are speaking, there's no maliciousness, you're just speaking your truth, you're speaking how you feel, you're asking for what you need, etc., etc., etc. If this is something that is truly affecting you, and it comes up over and over and over again, so often, I'm going to go on a tangent here. We as humans, we don't trust ourselves. We feel these things and we're like, it's easy to just brush it off and say, it's no big deal. Oh, that's not true. And we don't trust these little messages, or sometimes very loud messages that are coming through for us, that are there, coming from our inner wisdom, coming from our intuition, signaling for us to pay attention. And one thing, if I can share with you, that I've learned is that if something is coming up and is bothering me, there's a reason why it's coming up. When it comes up like that, yes, it could be some kind of irrational fear, or it could be coming from a place that is not rational. But chances are, if it's something that's coming up over and over and over again, and you are feeling these feelings in your body repetitively, that is a sign that what's coming through you is your own truth. So I invite you to pay attention to those things and listen to what is trying to come through. Sit in quiet reflection, write in your journal, ask questions. I was at the gym this morning and I was telling some of my friends this earlier. I kept having these, for probably the last 2 weeks, I've been having these strong fears of loss of my loved ones. And it's just coming up over and over and over again. And where I work from is that we never totally die, right? As humans, we're pure energy, we're cosmic beings. So when we leave our human body, we go to a different place. So we don't totally die. But lately I've been having these struggles with fear of loss. And my normal reaction for the past 48 years has been to notice it and react to it. And react in a fearful way, almost to try to escape from it. The way a lot of people tend to react to unpleasant thoughts. And finally, it was just coming up over and over again. And it was coming up in the gym while I was working out today. And it was coming up while I was driving home from the gym again. So finally, I was like, okay, this is coming up for a reason. I just spent this last full moon going through my journals and burning pages out of my journal to release old, I don't swear on this podcast, old crap from my life. And it seemed like the more journal burning I was doing, the more this fear of loss was showing up. So it was almost like, the way I perceive it is that letting go of all this old anxiety from my 20s and my 30s when these journals were written, and in my teens, some of these went back to the early to mid 90s. So mainly my early to mid 20s to early 30s. So the more pages that were being burned, just letting go of all this old stuff from my past, this feeling of fear of loss was starting to show up more and more, and it was starting to show up more strongly. So the way I interpreted it is that it's just my subconscious. It has room to process this fear of loss. So I sat in the car. I was driving home, and I was like, okay, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to process this. And I was, I had my eyes open, but I have these tactics that I use with my coaching clients, and I started to use them on myself. And it was almost like I was telling my friends, it was like I was two people. I was playing the role of the client and the coach in the same conversation, asking these very thought-provoking questions. And what I found out was this fear of loss was coming from something totally unrelated to what I was fearing. It came down to something very personal that I've been working through. But basically, I'll tell you right now that it came down to me not speaking my truth, to me hiding in my relationship, in my business. And you may remember episode 9, Are You a Hider?, where I talk about hiding pretty much the whole episode. It's a pretty short episode if you want to go check that out. But it came down to that. So it was just a matter of peeling those layers off to make room for more opportunities for growth. So warriors, growth never stops. Right? And I think that's why it might become more and more obvious to you too that a lot of people don't want to change because they're fearful of this process. Maybe it's the unknown. I don't know what it is, honestly. Everybody has their own story. So going back to this, what I interpret as this kind of this moral and ethical obligation to speak your truth. I talked about how it's important not only for you and for your physical health to speak your truth. It's important in your relationships, but it's also important if you're really committed to helping humanity, especially at a time where we're in this period of where there's a lot of turmoil and unrest and fear. If you want to turn that fear into doing something good for the good of humanity, the best thing that you can do is work on yourself. Even if it's uncomfortable, and it is bloody messy sometimes to do this work. I'm not going to lie. But for those of you who are listening and you say, for whatever reason, you don't want to make that investment and work with somebody. Like for me personally, it was working with, my real turning point was first when I worked with a spiritual guide, a shaman. And then I started working when I hired my first business coach. All those years of therapy for me personally they may have helped a little bit, but I felt like I was always winding up in the same place over and over. So therapy didn't really help me, but really helped me was having somebody help me go into the deeper aspects of myself and help guide me to do this inner work. So that I can now sit in front of this microphone at 10:30 at night and tell you about the importance of using your voice. And finally, I want to bring up one other point about using your voice. And I feel that this is like the icing on the cake, the creme de la creme, okay? We talked about, the 3 other reasons why it's important to use your voice. But you might be really interested in hearing this last reason why it's important to use your voice. And I'm just going to start off by stating a quote that came to me when I was driving home from the gym today after I did all of that inner work. By the way, it took all of 5 to 7 minutes. I only live 10 minutes from the gym, and I spent the first 3 minutes listening to a voicemail. So it doesn't take that long. For those of you that are saying you don't have the time, if you drive a car, if you go on walks, if you have 5 minutes to yourself, you can do this work, okay? So this is what came through me after I cleared all this fear and all this fear of loss. You are only a few sentences away from having your dream house, your dream business, your dream relationship, and your dream money, which is already there, waiting for you to claim it. And then I wrote, I love you so much. So, is it starting to make sense that your dream life and everything that you ever imagine wanting in this life, that you may or may not have, you may not even think that it's possible? It is possible 100% of the time when you start to speak up, when you start to speak your truth. Because what happens when you're coming from an open heart and you're speaking your truth and you're sharing your wisdom and you're being open and honest and saying the hard things, you are raising your vibration. You are bringing your vibration level up to that level that attracts all those things in your life that you want. Because everything's energy. And we are all energy. And just by simply being aware that we are the divine light, we are the goodness within, we have that goodness within that is able to manifest whatever we want. When you have that knowledge, when you have that realization, your life is going to change tremendously. Tremendously. And for some of you that are out there, I know I have a kind of a mixed audience. I have a lot of people that are really down and open to receiving whatever information, but I have some people out there that are understandably skeptical. And I totally understand why you may be skeptical. I totally get that. But let me ask you this. If your life is not where you want it to be, if you are not a 6 or a 7-figure earner, if you are an entrepreneur, or you want to be an entrepreneur, you have a job maybe that you want to leave and start your own business, or if you're just finding that you don't have the relationship that you want with your partner or with your children, or if you feel that maybe your children are suffering, let me ask you this. If your life isn't where you want it to be, and you continue to listen to information such as this, or maybe reading the books, and you continue to ignore it or put yourself last, or you talk yourself out of making an investment in yourself. Or maybe you listen to something that's really meaningful to you. It really speaks to your heart. And then you go out and tell your friends, or you tell your mom, or you tell maybe your husband or somebody who's not as open-minded, and they somehow talk you out of it and bring you back down to where you were. They bring you down to that small place that you were, that where you weren't advancing, where you weren't growing and you weren't expanding. So if you continue to stay in that space of restriction and lack, and where you feel like you need to count every penny before you spend it, or maybe you're not sleeping that well at night because there is a part of you deep down within your soul that knows that you're not living your soul's purpose, even though your soul is desperately trying to communicate with you, to pay attention and wake up. Where are you going to be if you continue on this path? 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year? I mean, there's people that go decades. You know, they're 70, 80 years old and they're still living in fear. Perhaps they've contracted a disease because they never dealt with their resentment and anger, or they never stepped into speaking up or rising strong. I stole that from Brene Brown, but it's such a powerful, powerful term. Rising strong. So it's not necessarily a matter of, you know, when it comes to making that investment in yourself, whether it's time or money, however it looks for you, whatever your objections are, it's not a matter of not having the time, or it's not a matter of not having the money to find ways to help you change your life, change your inner world. It's a matter of you not trusting yourself to do the work that is needed to do, that you need to do in order to have that life. A lot of people don't trust themselves. Most people don't trust themselves. It's a matter of having low self-worth, of not valuing yourself, of feeling like you don't deserve something, or who am I to be an expert online? What do I have to offer? Who am I to be a millionaire? Who do I think I am? What are my friends going to say? What are my old friends from high school going to say if they hear that I'm now a millionaire? Or I'm living the dream. And I'm living the dream so much, and I'm so happy. And I have everything that I want. And as a result, my heart is so open that I just want to give to those that need it. I want to share a little story with you on that note. You know, you probably already know I have a pretty large network of very heart-centered, mainly entrepreneurs that I'm constantly in contact with. And recently, one of my friends in that group posted like a GoFundMe page. And without going into a lot of detail, she posted that one of her family members needed a surgery, and she started a fundraiser for this family to raise money so that this family member could have the surgery. It was quite expensive. And I just happened to look at, because on Facebook you can see if mutual friends have donated to the same cause, you can see who they are. And I was just curious, you know, because this woman is in this heart-centered community with me. I was curious to see who I knew donated. And of course, I'm not passing judgment. It was just an observation. But a good portion of people that donated to her fundraiser were people that I personally knew. And this is somebody that we don't live in the same country. I met her. We live thousands of miles away from each other. So I never knew her before I was a member of this community of like-minded, heart-centered entrepreneurs. And you may or may not believe this, but a good majority of the people who donated were from the same group. It was like there was no question that these people were going to donate. Because that is what a lot of people get uncomfortable about, the subject of money. And that used to be me. I used to, I grew up in a home where we just didn't talk about money. It was embarrassing. It was shameful. You just didn't talk about what you had because oftentimes it was feared that people would judge you, whether you had it or you didn't have it. So I grew up on both sides. There was a period where I remember we didn't have any electricity because my, dad was starting a business and money was tight. And then I remember times of abundance. So, I saw both sides. I experienced both sides. So I grew up not talking about money, and that carried into my many, many years of my adulthood until I realized that it's really important to talk about money. It's important to be honest about money. Unfortunately, money has been given a bad reputation because maybe in the past, maybe a majority of the money has gone to people who are not necessarily nice people, or they take advantage of people. But that's not true anymore. There's this growing movement right now of heart-centered individuals who want to make a difference and who have businesses that are prospering so that they can donate to those Facebook fundraisers and those GoFundMe pages without question, because they have the money in the bank. They have the money and the abundance in their bank accounts. And that's what money is for. Money is just a form of exchange for a service given. I, in 2017, decided to hire my first business coach. And I haven't stopped working with somebody since then, for the most part. I've invested in myself, and I'm proud of those investments. And as a result of doing that, I have this business where I help people. I am helping humanity take it to the next level so that we don't self-destruct. Let's just be honest here and talk about the elephant in the room. If human beings don't wake up and we don't wake up, we need to actually all wake up. It can't just be like some of us are awake and the rest of us stay asleep. If you are somebody who is awake or on their way to being awake or curious about being awake, and for some reason you're hiding or you're not speaking up or you're not speaking your truth, and let me just add, and you're frustrated with the state of the world, okay, let's add that. You're perpetuating the problem. What you're doing is you're aggravating the problem instead of being part of the solution. Now, I'm not shaming anybody. I'm just saying it straight up. I'm known to be honest and raw. But it is your responsibility. It's all of our responsibilities to, if you're getting the call to expand your consciousness and to create a business that helps people, or even if you're in a job, you don't necessarily have to have a business, and you're ignoring it out of your own fear because you don't have the self-worth in order to do it, that's selfishness. You're holding back your gifts that other people could benefit from. And again, this is not the shame game, warriors, but it's really time to have these honest conversations. And if you hear my dog, she's sleeping. I'm in my office and she's snoring on the couch. But yeah. So that's why I'm here, warriors. I really feel called to share how very important each and every one of you are for the growth and evolvement of humankind. This is not a time to sit back and watch the world go by. This is not a time to play small. This is not a time to stay in our emotions, to stay stuck in our emotions, to stay stuck in our ego. So, where are you going to be 3 months from now, 1 year from now, if you continue to play the small game? And I invite you to really consider how you as an individual can have everything 100% of the time. And it starts with you being in alignment with yourself and you speaking your truth and you speaking up, even if it's hard, and doing the messy work. Because let's face it, guys, okay? Let's just have this conversation. For those of you that are like, oh, it's too hard or it's too scary. Well, what is the alternative? You know? For those who are struggling right now, is that any easier than doing the messy work and getting a little uncomfortable, but having these amazing results on the other side? Or just staying comfortable, not taking any action, not growing your business, not working on your inner self, watching Netflix, whatever it is, no judgment. I mean, what's more painful to you? What's more painful? Okay, so I think that's enough for today. I love you all so much, and I just want to express that. You know, I've been getting a lot of downloads for this podcast, and it really is my intention to help just one person. If my messaging gets through to one person every episode, then I've done my job. Because this is truly a labor of love, and you know, we're all here. We're all part of the puzzle. And we're here at this particular time in human history because we are meant to be part of this shift. I really believe that. So if you're ready, come on along. Thank you so much for listening. And if you had any takeaways, if there was any ahas, anything where you were like, oh my God, please feel free to share it on Instagram at I am Angela Noel. And just let me know what your takeaways are. I really would like to know what has been impactful for you. And I'm so grateful for you, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Empowered Warrior podcast. It is an honor and a privilege to have you as a listener. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast and would like to help others pave their pathway to freedom, end their disempowerment and suffering, and become an empowered warrior, please share this podcast with your friends and family. Also, it is my intention to help humanity grow and evolve to their highest potential. So if you really enjoy what you're hearing, please help me spread the word by leaving a review in iTunes. Thank you again, and I am so grateful to be able to serve you in this very exciting way.